Global Broadcasting Networks presents Military Mom Talk Radio. We know behind every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine is the family supporting them. With over 200 episodes in 17 countries, over 5 seasons, with 3 million monthly listeners, we are radio strong. Now here are your hosts, Sandra, Beck, and Robin Boyd.
Hey mamas, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Robin Boyd and we've got a great show today. We're going to talk with Cathy Kravfe. Now this is the second in our 3-part series on marriage and family, and we're going to talk today about marriages. Now I was married for a long time. I was married over 10 years and I found that there were ebbs and flows in marriage and there were difficulties and challenges. And one of the challenges that I faced was that I stopped dating. My ex-husband didn't, so that put a real ding in our marriage, and it actually rendered it non-recoverable, I think, because with the first affair, I kind of fell apart. And then the second one, I was like, really, we're going to do this again. And I got my ducks in order and filed for divorce. But not everybody has to go down that route. And long-term marriages especially require, I think, an understanding of the ebbs and flows of long-term relationships, the highs and lows, and also kind of a working knowledge of when to throw in the towel. Now, before I get to our guest, Cathy Kravfe, and my co-host, Robin Boyd, I want to give you the piece of advice that somebody gave me when I was thinking about filing for divorce. And my kids were 3 months old and 2.5 years old, so there's not many people that want to pull the plug at that point. But I called Robin, I think, every hour on the hour. I called my friends. I called my mom. I talked to a therapist. I talked to attorneys. I talked to a divorce coach. I actually hired a divorce coach to coach me through it because I knew I couldn't do all this on my own. And the one piece of advice came from another mom, and she looked at me across the hallway outside of the school. And she said to me, you know what, Sam? She goes, I know what you're going through. I've been there. She goes, one day you will wake up and you'll know what to do. And I didn't believe her at that point, but I thought, well, I'll give it a try, because there's no sense in, pulling the trigger too soon. You can always pull the trigger, later on. You don't have to jump into anything. And by God, she was right. I woke up one morning and I said, I'm done. I've gone through all the therapy. I've gone through the marriage counselors. I've read all the Save Your Marriage books. I've done. And I went into the attorney's office for the second time in that year with a clear head. And so if you decide to end your marriage, and this is a funny way to start the Happy Marriage shows, trust yourself that you will know when the time is right. If you're still asking questions, if you're still researching, you're not ready, you will wake up one morning, just like that other mom said, and know what the right course is for you and your children. So that being said, I think that's really important that everyone knows that. But when we are in our researching stage, and Cathy and Robin, you guys have been married a long time. Robin, you just celebrated your 40th, is that right?
That's right, yep.
There had to be times, and I'm not saying, I'm not asking you to reveal intimate details or whatever, but in 40 years, you can't tell me, and Cathy, you've been married over 25 or 30 years, how much?
It'll be 34 this summer.
34 this summer. Okay, so you guys have some pretty good long-term track record. There had to be times in your marriage that you thought, I can't do this anymore, or this is not good for the kids, or this is not good for me. And Rob, you went through cancer and cancer treatments when your kids were younger. So that's a whole different way of checking out. But you had to have some times in your marriage where you wondered if this was what you were supposed to be doing. And I'm going to go to Robin first and then to Cathy.
Absolutely. You do have times that you have to assess whether this is right. Am I doing this for me? Am I doing this for my children? Am I really in love with this person? You do look at each other and say, oh, but then you have to break it down. And sometimes you do need that external voice, somebody who's a counselor, your minister, your pastor, your priest, your whomever you turn to that's going to be honest with you as far as helping you look at your situation. you have to say, am I being true to myself? Am I being true to my children? Am I in harm's way? Or am I trying to say, oh, he hit me and I deserved it? You don't ever want to be in a situation where you are putting up with physical or emotional abuse that is not healthy for you. And being strong enough to face that is, I think, something that every person who's in that situation has to be very, very brave inside to do. And you, Sandra, were very, very brave to have to do, to make that choice and finally say, I am strong. I am doing what's right for me. I am doing what's right for my children. I am proceeding in this path. And then that gives you the freedom to enjoy life in a new way. You may be single, but you are loving life in a whole new way for you, for your children, and for whatever future relationship you do have.
Well, and I just want to chime in here for the girls that are out there considering, and especially if you are in a domestic violence situation. My domestic violence happened after we were divorced, which I think, I never did anything right, Rob. Of course, I get that one screwed up. But I guess that's very common. It's very common when you divorce someone who's abusive, and then even after the divorce is final, especially in a co-parenting situation, it still continues to escalate. So I want to honor the moms out there, especially who had the experience I had, because even then I was like, oh my God, Rob, I'm sitting in this domestic violence class, and even I didn't do it right until the lady said, oh, a lot of times, the things that lead up to the physical violence, I got out before the physical violence escalated, at least out of the marriage. But it was funny to me that I didn't think it would continue. I thought the divorce would end it all. And to my surprise, it didn't, especially in a co-parenting situation where you can use the legal system, social workers, you can use friends and family to still continue to abuse you and beat you up. But I just wanted to acknowledge that and honor people that, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be hard for a while, but you will get through it, and nothing lasts forever. And that's, I think, the big theme of today is, like, for me, I got out of a bad marriage at the point at which I knew it was right for me. And I want to empower women to do that. But for the women that choose to stay and duke it out in these long-term relationships that don't have financial abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse, because, boy, there's a whole lot of different kinds of things people can do to each other, all sorts of wacky things. Yeah. But when the relationship is boring or the relationship has lost its spark, and I hear people say to me now, like, I'm in my 40s, so I hear my friends saying, like, oh, we just don't love each other anymore. We're like roommates. We're like, maybe I should file for divorce. And I want to, like, take their heads and bonk them together. It's like, that's not, to me, a really good reason to break up a family. To me, it's like, what? That tells me if you're both still together, you're both loyal, you're both co-parenting, work on your marriage. And so, Cathy Kravfe, I'm going to go to you. There had to be times in your 35-year marriage that you were bored or your husband was bored and you guys felt just like coworkers because you were raising kids, and trust me, that's a good one to make you guys fall into that coworker category.
Yeah, I think that's one of our things we do now. Dave and I talk so openly about the struggles we've had along the way, and one reason we do is because when we hit there were many struggles along the way, of course, but we hit kind of a crisis moment in our marriage, and we felt like there was nobody around us that could even relate. I mean, from our point of view, it was like we knew people who were divorced and we knew people that were happily married, but we didn't know anybody that would just tell us, oh, guess what? Marriage is hard. It's not, Walt Disney and fairy dust. So that's what we have done now that we've experienced so many different challenges and overcome them. We try now to talk very openly about what that process looks like for us, because every marriage is different. You have two different people, but people can hear the stories and begin to make their own choices about how they want to do their marriage. I was just going to tell y'all one thing. There was a moment. Dave has always said this, but it must be about when you've been married about 30 years, when people ask how long have you been married, and you tell them they start saying, oh, wow, that's so neat. That's so cool. How did you do it? And Dave always says, it's a miracle. And people would look at me like my feelings would be hurt. And I would just start laughing and go, no, he's just telling you the truth. It's a miracle. We don't know how we did it, you know. I mean, hard work. but yeah, it's not like something that we take credit for. But on the other hand, we do know it takes a real commitment. And it also takes the right circumstances. Some marriages you cannot recover in because they're not safe. I'm glad you said as much as you did about that. We're talking about saving marriages that are savable, salvageable, and making them fabulous. We're not, but there are some marriages that can't be saved, and we really need to let each other have permission to acknowledge that, I think.
And it's true, the knowing and being strong enough to face that. It's not to say that you're not going to go through a rocky time. We had some times that were rocky, and you did too, Cathy. You said that you had times that it really did take some effort, but facing it and then facing it together, you were able to not only resurrect, but you were able to probably create an even stronger relationship on the other side of it because you did work it out together. And maybe that was the blessing in disguise.
I think it's funny. Jackie Kennedy said this: the first time you marry for love, the second for money, and the third for companionship. And I would just say, maybe we should reverse that and just go for companionship. Just start there. I like what Sandra raised that question earlier about.
Yeah.
You know, the young people are getting confused about what they're in the marriage for in the first place.
Isn't it true? We're talking today with Cathy Kravfe. She is our guest for the hour, so make sure you're comfy, cozy. We've got some great conversation coming up, so we want you to stay right with us here on Military Mom Talk Radio. Don't go away. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
It's words you never heard.
If you're like me, sometimes you have trouble choosing between being a couch potato or going out. Hey, it's a big decision for us scabberlatchers. A scabberlatcher or a ragabash is another word for a lazy person. Well, a couple from California seems to have solved the problem by inventing a motorized sofa. You may think they're just spinning their wheels, but people have spotted the couple cruising down the street on their drivable Davenport in West Los Angeles and Santa Monica. No word yet on the couple's identity, but a man claiming to be a relative said it's all well within the norm for his fun-loving cousin. I don't know if this Chesterfield on wheels is street legal, but either way, I think the police would have to put up quite a chase before they could couch him.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio. Hey everyone, this is Military Mom Talk Radio, and I'm here with Sandra Beck. She's on, she's taking care of some dogs right now. We're here today with Cathy Kravfe. She's our guest, and we're talking about relationships
How about
good, bad.
relationships where you're going to kill your dad, your dogs, and your children all at the same time? They're all in the kitchen, like making noise. I'm trying to run the show, and this is typical single motherhood. You know, not married. You're juggling everything. So I'm sorry about that. I was like running on making soup and everything for one sick kid, and it's all good. But that's marriage, or well, that's family.
That's right. Isn't it true? Families, I love the fact that this generation is so multifaceted. Family can be anything. Family can be a multitude of dimensions. And isn't that wonderful that our kids are growing up with that kind of freedom, that kind of openness, that there's acceptance in no matter what that definition is. Cathy, I think. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think it's so important for us to realize that we're designed to have fellowship and companionship. And I especially think when we're talking about military wives or military husbands who have a hero on deployment, being without the kind of companionship that you're designed for can be so tricky. So I think if we need to really acknowledge that so that we know how to look around and recognize when we have companionship that's healthy and wholesome in other ways. That's just a crucial part of our design and our makeup as human beings.
I think there are so many times when we begin a relationship, we might have expectations, we might have hopes that this is going to be a vision of what we're thinking the relationship would be. And maybe things don't always come to that same process in the same time frame or the same manner. And I think when we enter a relationship, it's important to sort of keep an open mind and not sort of put parameters or boundaries around those expectations. Do you think, Cathy, that there are a lot of phases or growth spurts that we should expect in a relationship?
Yes, and I've heard you use the word evolution, Robin, and I think that is such a great word for what happens in marriage. And I really wish when I'd been a young mother, because, there's that honeymoon stage the first 2 years. And I thought that was just unique to Dave and I, but I wish someone had told us to expect that would end. So if you're young and you're newly married and you're experiencing the 2 years of honeymoon bliss, I want you to know that when that comes to a screeching halt, you're not unusual or weird and you didn't marry the wrong person. That's very typical. That's a normal phenomenon that happens. And then from there, we begin to learn some skills that we may not have gotten growing up in our own families. And the beautiful thing about marriage is it brings together different backgrounds, different kinds of wounds and baggage, and you combine them together and begin to form something totally new out of all your skills, and your opposites attract, and your baggage and your family background and some of the fabulous things your parents taught you. Those all go into the same pot, and you begin to pick the things you love and the things you don't want to take into the rest of your future together. So there's definitely stages in marriage, and I do wish people would talk more about that.
Talking, that's the operative word. I think so many times communication is just said so loosely, but we need to take that word so seriously. Being able to communicate with your partner, and that just doesn't always have the same definition. Communication is really important.
I think it is. And of course, I studied journalism and I got a lot of communication in school. So I never even thought of that as something I wasn't good at.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just never occurred to me. And so poor Dave, and I would just throw more words at him. And I think he was overwhelmed. He's, of course, because I'm an extrovert, he's an introvert. So naturally we would find each other right. Just like I have to have the thermostat up to 70 and he needs it at 60. So there you have it. I mean, we're just so opposite. I sometimes wonder how we ever managed to find compatibility and fellowship together and tenderness. But anyway, communication is something you always hear about. And again, it was one of the, I don't know, I must sound like somebody that didn't have any experience, but it was one of those things I just had no idea what a challenge it was going to be for us. And so right now I'm working on a book and I'm almost done with it. But my favorite chapter in the whole book, I mean, I wish I could just download it to everybody's computer today so they could see it answers the question, how do you change an argument back into a conversation? I just wish I that 34 years ago, the day we got married, I did not know. I just kept arguing. I did not know how to get from the place where I just knew I was right and he better hear me to the place where, oh, okay, we're talking about this again. So I tried. Sorry.
No, what I was going to say is I think sometimes we have to be able to speak our mind, but we have to be willing to listen to the answer. And we cannot forecast what the other person is going to say, nor can we dictate what the other person is going to say. We have to expect or accept what the other person is going to say freely.
Well, when I got to the heart of answering that question, how do you change an argument back into a conversation? And my sweet friend, Sandra Beck, who always makes me think harder than I want to, she made me answer that in one sentence. And the answer was by asking a gentle question. That just changed everything. Once I had it diagnosed, I could see it. I mean, we were doing it already by then. By the time I got around to writing this book, I knew what I needed to do in practice. I just had to figure out how to reduce it to 1 or 2 sentences so it would be something I could transfer to other people, and just share with other people. So that was the answer. But as you know, Robin, because you're so great at asking great questions, a gentle question changes your whole attitude. I mean, suddenly you're listening instead of computing your next response in the debate,
Right. Because instead of being defensive, instead of saying, no, and you certainly want to express your opinion, but you also need to be willing to accept what the other answer is and then find that common ground that's going to be okay, the common ground that's going to be, all right, I'm going to concede here, but I'm going to accept that. You definitely want to find the way that the two of you can work that compatibility out. I look at with my son. He married a woman who I love. I'm very, very pleased that these two are married. I love the fact that she has brought her life into our family. She comes from a very different background than ours is. And she actually put it to me one day. She says, Robin, you have to remember not all families are like yours. And I had to sit back and say, oh, my goodness, what does that mean? But we do speak out. We're very, so if we were supposed to have dinner at 7, but someone got caught in traffic, then we'll have dinner at 7:15. It's okay. And I think sometimes other relationships do put these boundaries on what can be talked about. There's a boundary around the discussion. Yes, I'll discuss this with you, but your answer has to be within these parameters or else it's unacceptable. We do need to accept the other person.
One thing I discovered when I began to practice this, and I don't know, it's probably been, 10 years, maybe more. But once I began to practice that art of a gentle question, what was fascinating to me is my whole family kind of picked up on it. And my husband, he will actually literally even now stop like an argument, stop debating, stop trying to tell me why I'm being illogical because I don't agree with him, which he's very logical. So he has me at a disadvantage, but he'll stop and I'll see it compute. It's like I can almost see all the little wheels turning in his head. And next thing I know, he'll come out with a gentle question because he's wanting to do the same thing. He's not wanting to argue. So that exercise for us both has been so transforming for our marriage, learning to look at each other and think, what general question could I ask now that would transform this debate back into a conversation?
And that's an art, I think, that we all need to learn sooner than later. Because obviously, if you haven't caught on to that and it's 40 years down the road and you're still not computing, that's certainly a challenge. And you've got a lot of lost time between then and now. You would certainly want to make sure that your time is growing and you're actually enhancing your relationship so much more. We're with Cathy Kravfe today. We have a break coming up, Cathy. So on the other side of the break, maybe a little bit more about those communication skills, in that with the military, there are so many times that we are not physically together, and a lot of our communication is remote. A lot of our communication is either has to be a little bit cryptic because we can't. We might be in a public place when we're trying to communicate, or maybe he's standing in the middle of a general office and a whole lot of people are moving on, so he can't say all of the intimate things that he might want to say. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about the art of communication. We're with Cathy Kravfe today, and I do want to let everybody know she's got a great website. You should go to Cathy, and that's spelled Cathy. Kravfe is spelled Kraf as in Frank, V as in Victor, E.com. So we want you to go and visit her there. This is Military Mom Talk Radio, and if you ever want more information about us, we're at militarymomtalkradio.com. We're always there. We've got lots of podcasts for you if you want to catch up on some of our past topics, and if you're interested in more information about Cathy, we have a whole series with her, and we're so pleased that she is taking the time to be with us. We'll be back in a moment here on Military Mom Talk Radio. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Would you like to know how to bring more ease to all the decisions you need to make in life? Knowing your core values is the first step in Joyce's free live masterclass. You'll discover your top 5 core values in as little as 45 minutes. Join her now at freegiftfromjoyce.com.
It's words you never heard.
Do you ever get nervous riding in an elevator because you're afraid the cable might snap? It's entered my mind more than once. According to Elevator World magazine, on the rare occasion a cable breaks, the car won't plunge to the bottom. This is because elevators have as many as 10 cables holding them up, each capable of supporting a fully loaded car. Sometimes I feel a little mischievous in elevators. Next time you're feeling like a rapscallion, try one of these little jokes. When there's only one other person in the elevator, tap them on the shoulder and then pretend it wasn't you. Push one of the buttons and pretend it gave you a shock. Or maybe start a sing-along. What's a word for a person who thinks he's funny but no one else does? Witzelsucht.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to Military Mom Talk Radio. This is Robin Boyd with you for Sandra Beck, and we're talking today with Cathy Kravfe. We're talking about relationships. Cathy having a long-term relationship. She's 34 and counting, and Robin Boyd here with 40 years and counting. there are so many times over the years that we have been just in bliss. We've been content. We've been happy. We have traveled or shared the joy of our children, had a family gathering and having family around, and we've just had a wonderful time. And then there are times when either we're separated physically or maybe separated emotionally. Maybe somebody is going through a time in their life, maybe our spouse has lost their job or is downsized or has to move into a different phase in their life. Maybe illness is taking over, and you need to sort of pause where you thought you were. In fact, Cathy, I'll share with you, when my mom had a stroke, my dad passed away in 1994 in February. That same year, she had a stroke. Here she was finding herself as a single person and sort of getting on after Dad died, and she was starting to venture out, and she did a little bit of traveling, and then come August, she had a stroke. And all of what I thought my life would be, in fact, I had written a blog about it, the fact that here I thought I was going to sort of see my children off to college, and my husband and I would take up golf and we would travel. And bam, that just completely was shattered. And there was a time that, my husband and I were fine. We were not distanced from each other, but I think we were living a parallel life. We were not living a unified life at that point. I had a completely new role that I never thought I was going to have to face at that stage in our marriage and in raising my children. My mother was faced with the challenge of being a dependent, which she was a very independent woman. She was such a spitfire. She just had an opinion for everything, and she let you know it. And to be able to have this kind of change, and then to be able to realize, here I've got these people around me, but deep inside my heart, I'm lonely as heck. I don't know how to get out of this. What kind of thoughts do you have on feeling lonely and how to pull yourself back closer into the relationship that you so desperately need?
Well, I love it that you brought that up, because I do think that that's one of you mentioned expectations earlier in the hour. And one of the things that happens is we get married and we think that we're going to have the happily ever after. And we don't know what that looks like, because Walt Disney never gets to that stage. I mean, he never shows the rest of the story after they have the perfect romantic kiss, and that's it. The scene closes and that's it. So, but the truth is, the real story is, when we see these people that have been married 50 years and we talk to them and we find out what they lived through, we find out there were moments in any marriage where the wife, I'm saying that because we're speaking mostly to women, I think.
Yeah.
But the wife feels so alone and lonesome. And so there are a lot of things as women in our, as we get older and we've lived in marriage for a long time, we begin to understand there's just all these things that we have that are resources. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is really open your eyes and say, what are my resources? And one thing that is true is there's always other women around that are observing our life and wanting to help us, but they don't know how to reach out to us. They don't want to impose. They don't want to intrude. And yet they may even recognize the signs because they've lived through this. They know what it looks like. So I would always say look for resources. And I especially think that's true for our military wives, our heroes on the home front that are their husbands far away. I loved what you shared about having to have intimate conversations in a room filled with other military personnel. Oh, my goodness. I can't even imagine. And I can't talk about military very easily because I always start tearing up, but I'm always so grateful for the sacrifices that our military men and women and their families make for our freedom. I'd never want to miss a chance to say thank you for that. But while we're talking about marriage and being alone and lonely in marriage, here are some things that I've tried. I just made a list while we've been talking, at least 5 things I can think of that helped. Dave and I decided to create a shared vision, and that unified us no matter how far apart we are or where he was traveling with his work. I learned to negotiate a lot better over 30-something years of marriage. I was not real good at negotiating when we started, And that led to some of our problems because I hadn't been asking for what I wanted because I didn't even know what I wanted. So learning to negotiate well, asking for what you really want and need is a big part of that. And welcoming others into your life, which goes with finding your resources. But another one I thought of as we were talking is Dave and I have developed a personal etiquette. And I would recommend this for any young couple. I know you guys have it too, Robin. If there's something that I think is rude for him to behave toward me, I certainly don't want to do that to him. It needs to be, there's no double standards. It needs to be what's good for the goose is good for the gander, is good for both of you. But there ought to be kind ways that we treat each other in marriage. It doesn't always work out that way, but I do think that there should be a standard. And I would assume that when you're so far from each other, that would really help, even if there were other people in the room. So tell me a little bit about how that works while we're on this topic, Robin. How does that look when you have to have a conversation and your husband is a million miles away, but there might be 50 people listening and it's your only chance to talk?
I think sometimes setting up little buzzwords, and it could just be intimate between the two of you. You can probably say something. Maybe he could say, I always loved your cupcakes. And you know what he's talking about, but it doesn't have to be public. There are some things that I think you say to each other that are just intimate between the two of you. I think there are times that you need to remember each other just in a moment. We're lucky in this day and age that we can text each other and we can be able to communicate a lot easier than we ever did. I mean, in my day, you had to wait for the letter to come. You had to wait for the postman. Now you can wait for a text message. And I think sometimes being able to just send a quick text, love you, thinking about you, sitting at the rock or wherever it was that maybe you had your first intimate moment. It's one of those things that make you a little more connected. It's just important between the two of you. Maybe it's a song. Maybe it's just typing the lyrics or saying the lyrics of a song. And within those lyrics, that means so much more to your partner because it's bringing you back to that moment where you were together in heart, in moment, in your soul, and finding that intimacy, not physical intimacy, but that heart intimacy, that able to connect your hearts at that given moment is going to just keep you together, keep the bond strong, no matter where your life is taking you apart. To know that soulmate is there for you and he or she is there sharing that moment with you just makes it as intimate as if you were together in that marital union.
I love that. I just think that's such great advice. But it does prompt me to ask a real honest question. There are just times when I know I ought to give my husband that satisfaction of some sweet little token of affection like that, but my prideful heart just won't do it. I'm like, no, he doesn't deserve that. He should be doing that for me, blah, blah, blah. So tell me, since you've been married longer than me, what is your secret to giving those things when you know you should, but you don't want to because you just are, selfish, or I don't even know how to describe my feelings about that, but just mean. Sometimes I'm just ornery. So
there's also times that you can say, honey, I miss you. I haven't felt connected to you. I want to find a time where we can we can reconnect, if for lack of a better term, and depending on what your circumstance is, I think it's okay for you to say to your partner, I need to reconnect. I need to find each other. I feel a little lost right now. I'm not feeling you right now. And I'm here when you're ready to reach back to me. And I think you have to be honest.
I love that. That is such great advice. I love that advice. Thank you for that.
Well,
I might
being
have to do that
honest,
today.
being honest.
That is just so great. And honestly, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I wish somebody had, like, I may have to tattoo that one on my forehead for a few days.
Oh.
That's the kind of stuff I wish people had given me when I was in my 20s, not now when I'm in my 50s, but it's not too late. And that's the truth. You can always
It's never
learn a new skill.
too late.
You can always learn a new skill. We talked about last time, I'm pretty sure this was on the last podcast that we talked about creating a mission statement for your family.
Yes, you did.
I didn't want to miss a chance to refer back to that in case somebody missed that first episode. They would know that we talked a lot about how a mission statement will unify your family. And I think that's so important when you're especially deployed. I just know that must be very important.
I think so, because I think you do. You stick with it, if you will. You have it in your heart, because it's like saying a prayer. We know that we are bound by a prayer that we say, and we may say it week after week after week when we're at church, or night after night when we go to bed, or during our day. But having it within our heart does mean that we have that bond to the words in whom we share that promise with. But I also think too that just there are so many times that we are distanced from each other, that there are times that we have to be patient. We can't always expect that just because I need something right this minute, we have to know and trust that other person is going to come back when they can, or say the things we need to hear when they can, especially when someone's deployed. We don't always have the luxury of knowing everything that's going through their mind and heart. If they're on a mission, if they're doing a job, they have to focus on that job. And we can't be hung up on, oh, honey, you didn't say I love you when you hung up, and then sit there for 2 weeks worrying about why didn't he say I love you. You've got to trust that the fact that he did text you, or he did send a message, or he said thinking of you, or yeah, I got to go. He's giving you that indication that right now I'm doing my job, and I am going to be back with you as soon as I can. And we are going to be back in just a minute, Cathy. We've got a break coming up, so we want everybody to stay put and have trust that we're going to be back. Check us out at MilitaryMomTalkRadio.com, or find us on Twitter and Facebook. Our shows are available on iTunes anytime from 0000 hours to 23:59. For now, stay right where you are. There's more Military Mom Talk Radio after these messages.
It's words you never heard.
Did you ever wonder about the origin of Murphy's Law? You know the maxim that if anything can go wrong, it will. Murphy's Law was named after Captain Edward A. Murphy, an engineer working at Edwards Air Force Base in 1949. Captain Murphy was working on a project designed to measure how much sudden deceleration a human could stand in a crash. After discovering a transducer constructed for the experiment was wired wrong, Murphy squabashed the technician responsible by exclaiming, "If there's any way to do it wrong, you'll find it." In other words, circumvent mistakes and miskabobbles before they happen. Aerospace manufacturers began quoting Murphy's Law to their engineers, and soon it became an eponym.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
Information about book publishing is power. The power to change your authoring life, and the power to change the lives of your readers. So join us for Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. You'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now. As the book shepherd, Dr. Judith Briles is in. And each week, she will include publishing professionals that will reveal tips and secrets to the author's journey. If there is a book in you want to listen, learn, and yes, call in with your questions each week. For more on Judith and what she can do for you, check out her website, thebookshepherd.com. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by Author You and the Book Shepherd with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio. This is Robin Boyd with you today on Military Mom Talk Radio. Thanks for being with us. We're so glad to share this time with you. If you do miss any of this show or our other shows, we want you to visit militarymomtalkradio.com. All of our podcasts are there, this one as well as many, many more. We're on iTunes. We want to invite you there as well. If you're on the go, take a podcast with you because there's some great guests and some wonderful conversations we've had in the past, as well as this wonderful conversation that we are having right now with Cathy Kravfe. We're so appreciative for you to be here, Cathy. We're talking about communication, and we're talking about keeping bonds strong. And when a bond starts to weaken a little, there are times that we need to sort of be patient and let that evolve. There are times that maybe either an absence, the old term absence makes the heart grow fonder, doesn't necessarily mean that when they go away, it doesn't need a little reconstruction when we're reunited again. And I think there are times, even if it's not a deployment, even if it's you've been side by side in the same household all the time, there are times that a divide does happen, and coming back together again, we need to remove boundaries. We need to let go. We need to either forgive or release or find the way to open our hearts for what's new and improved, maybe. that terminology. There's always room for improvement in every relationship. What do you think, Cathy, as far as when you realize that there are boundaries that have cropped up and come, what's the best way to sort of alleviate those boundaries so that we can flourish in what's yet ahead?
Well, I love it that you brought up boundaries. We've been talking, of course, we started out talking about how there are stages of marriage. And for me personally, I just didn't get clear boundaries growing up. In retrospect, I mean, at the time I didn't notice, and maybe it's like you said earlier, each family has sort of their own dynamic, and then you bring two families together and you do have to figure out how to navigate that combining sort of collaborative thing that happens in a marriage. So for us, I didn't even know how to identify what boundary issues were, first of all. So counseling really helped with that. It helped me understand how important it is for me to know what I want, and also to listen to my own intuition when something was going a certain way and I didn't feel comfortable with that. How did I clarify that for my husband or myself even? So I think boundaries are really important. And I think one thing that may happen is, as women, we get really overcommitted because we like to help people. We think it's fun. It's part of our nurturing nature to want to just welcome all the little ducks and geese and chicks into our little nest, you know. So we can get pretty overbooked pretty quickly in our lives. And you mentioned earlier saving time for your husband or saving time for the most crucial relationships in order to cherish them. I think it's so important for us to prioritize. And to me, boundaries and priorities are almost the same thing now. So I have certain things that I know I want to be true about my life. And because I know that, I also know I have to save time for those specific things. And that especially means making time for a family, especially my new grandchildren I have. I really want to spend time with them. Mm-hmm. But that also means I have to choose not to do other things. I have a friend one time who told me she felt so bad because she wasn't letting her kids watch much television, and she knew there were some good things that she could rent or download for them. And so she felt bad she didn't let them do hardly any television. And I said, you know, you get rid of the good things, and that makes room for the great. So your kids are getting to play outside and do some of those things that a lot of kids in this generation are not getting to do. So anyway, I think that's a lot of what boundaries is for me now, is knowing where my priorities are. And it took me a while to understand that. I don't know if that answers the question of how you do that in marriage, but it helps. I know that I've grown in that area, and I know that boundaries are very important.
We have not only mother guilt, but I think it's broader than that. It's woman guilt. I think we guilt ourselves to keeping up a standard. We put expectations on ourselves that we think we have to fulfill. We don't always have to fulfill anything that we aren't willing to accept. And like you say, the priorities, we don't need to put these expectations on ourselves that we aren't willing to complete. If someone else down the street can do the Boy Scout troop, the Girl Scout troop, also run the soccer team and also do this and also do that, you do have to wonder, where is time for A, herself, B, her faith, B, C, her family. You do wonder what's lacking if she's doing it all. And I think we have to give ourselves permission to not have to be the all. We do what's right for us. We do what's right for our family, for our relationships.
And I think in marriage, especially, unity is disrupted pretty quickly when we don't give the time we need to each other to cherish each other. So, and one thing that happens is our resentment can begin to grow. We resent that our time is not being used the way we want it to be used, or that we're not getting quality time together, or that they don't seem to have enough attention for us. But one thing that can happen is we feel neglected by each other, and then we can begin to have that sense of resentment and bitterness. Now, I do know bitterness is cured by gratefulness. And I think I haven't been in a military marriage, but I do know that when David has been gone and traveled with his work, which he has done quite a bit, especially when we had young children in the home, that my bitterness would become almost overwhelming, because I would feel that I was doing so much with the kids and not getting a break. And he was gone. And I imagine he felt bitter that he would be working so hard and not get to see the kids. So you can see how easily that would be like a little rabbit hole for both of us. But being grateful for each other can cure that pretty quickly. And I certainly know that works. I just know from experience that it does. But it may sound a little trite, because when you're feeling like, I just don't like this situation, it's really hard to be grateful. You know, it is a discipline. It's not easy to say, I'm going to sit here and write down the things I love about this man, even though I'm mad at him right now. You know?
But acknowledging that, I think, is perfectly fine. We can say, you know, right now I'm not feeling real happy. And I think that it brings you back to that communication. We don't need to diss the other person in dumping all of our anger into viciousness, but I think we can definitely release our anger by that communication and saying, I'm having difficulty right now accepting or dealing. Right now, I don't like that you're working every night of the week, and I'm having a hard time with it. That doesn't mean that he can't change the fact that he's working every night, because maybe there's a project coming up. He has to fulfill it. He has to complete it. But that acknowledging it and communicating it at least is the beginning of breaking down that barrier.
Yes. And I think for me, I'll give you an example. There was one day, this was years ago. I don't know how long we've been married, but not that long. Mm-hmm. And we were having some kind of, well, let's just say it was an argument. And he said something like, well, I'm going to write this down and we'll go to the counselor and talk about it. And I thought, I'm going to make my own list. And I sat down to write down a list of things I was unhappy about that needed to be talked about at the counselor's office. And I'm always prayerful, even in my 20s. That was just a part of my life outlook. And so I started praying, and the Lord convicted me that I needed to write a list of why I loved him and what it was that attracted me to him in the first place. So I always tell my kids, I don't know where that list is, but I save paper like a pat rat. So it's probably somewhere in a file. And before they throw out all my paper files from years ago, they should definitely look for it. But that became my habit. Instead of making my list of things I was mad about, I would make a list every time we had a disagreement of reasons that I loved him and that I knew we were attracted to each other or called to each other by our mutual attraction was a very natural part of the design God intended for us. And so I began to write those things down. And I mean, it got to where I didn't have to write them down anymore because I could just remember them. And that's a real healthy place to be in a marriage.
I think sometimes writing things is important. Some people aren't comfortable with journaling, but I think sometimes we do need to at least physically write some things down because then it's visible, it's tangible, we're holding it. When things are abstract, it's too easy to not take it seriously or not pay attention to it. So by having it written down, even if it means you're going to burn it after you've written it, the fact that you've actually held it in your hand and had physical control over it does give you the ability to manage it maybe in your heart even more.
And I know we're coming to the end of this podcast. Yes. I'm so grateful that I've had a chance to share every little thing you've let me, anything I could share that would encourage somebody to hang in there. If they have a marriage that can be saved, it doesn't have to be just saved. It can be awesome. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, I want to share something that a great military leader shared, because you know how I love quotes, Robin.
Yes.
I love this one. And when I tell you who it is, if you don't know, if you don't recognize it, you're going to go, oh my gosh. My most brilliant achievement was my ability to be able to persuade my wife to marry me. And the brilliant military leader who said that was Winston Churchill. Isn't that great? Of all things he did.
Wonderful.
I mean, he wrote an extensive history of his people and led a nation and allies to conquer one of the worst evils in World War II we've ever seen. And then he said his best achievement was marrying his wife.
Marrying his wife. Oh, God bless him.
Every wife who's listening to know you are your husband's best achievement when he persuaded you to be his partner for life.
That is so true. And Cathy, we are so appreciative that you have given this time to us. Cathy Kravfe, if you want more from her, watch for her new book that'll be coming out. Go to Cathy, Cathy, Kravfe, Kraf as in Frank, V as in Victor, E. Be back next week, Doc. Thanks for tuning in to Military Mom Talk Radio. Want more information? Check us out at militarymomtalkradio.com or find us on iTunes for more than 200 free episodes. Drop us an email or find us on Facebook. We are looking forward to another great discussion. We hope you'll join us on